All right, we'll see if we can take your prompt and not become, it's easy to get sort of like hysterical by all the ways in which you're signaling. But let's try that again, or not that, but just what was in the paper. It was in the paper, and then there was more. There was a couple articles in the paper, um, and then there was something you knocked, and there was something in the news, and then someone passed in the unified field, and your friend got sort of. It makes you a little jumpy, but what the prompt would be to just be like I said, not an expert on such things, but to sort of put it together a little bit as best I think what you would want us to share with people. Um, the main thing that was noticeable in the paper. There is the hundreds of thousands of people, the largest in the Ukraine. I've been staging what is the largest, and it's spilled into violence, the largest protest of since the Orange Revolution. Okay, so there's a major event, like will be, and if you perceive history like that, a historic event. It's over. It's over the. I understand correctly. It's over. The president had pulled away from what was going to be a trade pact with. He was supposed to be sort of moving closer to Russia, which has become more nationalist in orientation, and it's over this trade pact and that not being part of it and moving in more of what the paper sort of calls a pro-Western line, has led to hundreds of thousands of people in the Ukraine staging the largest protest since the Orange Revolution. That's one thing. That's sort of one thing that it was in the paper and you knocked when it was being talked about on the TV, and it's over pulling away from a trade pact and sort of going more towards like a pro-Western, meaning like the whole point of having these sort of trade blocks would be protection for the economy. As a matter of fact, that's what most countries want when there's people like no, it's the kind of thing that people know about, like extremists all over the place. But as far as like what's the thing? It's people are looking to make an alliance with nations who also want protection from their economy, from America and the transnational sector. It's not that anyone like dislikes the West or anything like that. But so there's hundreds of thousands of people protesting in the Ukraine. But there's also and that was on the news. Okay, when you knocked. There's also there's an article in another paper about what's going on in Spain. That there's sort of marches there too, and what it's sort of spilling out to the point where they can no longer sort of quell the tide of nationalist fervor and sort of and nostalgia for the for the Falangist history, the fascist government that was there. That sort of it's sort of like a nostalgic thing for there's a lot of the neo-fascist movements there, and this is like finally like people are cheering for front wanting back Franco's Spain and everything. So there's that kind of thing which they're calling sort of neo-fascist. There's hundreds of thousands of people in the Ukraine protesting, and then you signaled also over here. So what you sort of put I thought how to tie those things together. I know how they're tied together, but for the sake of bringing people information about these historic events, like what way to tie them together, and you sort of provided a sort of clue. Right. One reason people don't know that much about what's going on with those things here. They don't they don't, and why not? I mean, them saying in the liberal colleges and stuff, they just don't teach people about what's happening in the world. Not really. It's that they don't. They don't. These things are over economics and trade. But here's the thing: the reason they probably don't teach it here, like why is everyone illiterate about these? What's causing all these different historic events and protests? So why don't they? The vague idea it's happening, don't know what it's about. Why is that? Well, there's something that the university system and sort of intellectuals here have to keep a big secret. And in order to keep it secret, it would also require that people end up not understanding what's going on all over the world when there's big historic events like that. What it is that we're supposed to have, we were supposedly, or at some point, or we probably should, Canada and Mexico and the United States, or theoretically we should have some, like, some kind of trade block. That would be what was supposed to happen when there was all this talk of, like, there's going to be, this is in the early 90s, like there's going to be some, like a trade arrangement. What ended up happening, and this is why no one knows, this is why the universities and, like, sort of intellectuals would have to keep people in the dark about what's happening elsewhere. It would happen accidentally by keeping them in the dark about what happened when we moved towards having what's called a free trade agreement and the free trade agreement. That's a misleading term, because it doesn't have to do with, it doesn't have really to do anything with trade or free markets or anything. What it was, but you'd have to keep, the universities would have to keep it silent for this to happen. What it was we have a giant state subsidized, no competition, a giant state subsidized, agro industry making extremely cheap things that you can only do that when the state is, like, integrated with it and tax dollars pay for it. And then the agreements forced open South American markets and started moving on a kind of silent genocide through economic means. Thousands and thousands of people starving, and people who attempt to protest that are, that's why we have bases over there for this, like, agreement. It's kind of like a silent genocide going on in Latin America as a result of this thing that's, like, called free trade. So nothing trade. By the way, trade is in decline all over the world. Certainly, trade's been in absolute decline since those agreements. But what is happening is a kind of, like, economic genocide over south of the border. But right, in order for people not to know that, like when 50,000 people assembled in Seattle and, like, they had to bring out, they brought out tear gas and everything. What was no one, in the same sense that no one knows what's going on in Spain or the Ukraine right now, people didn't know in the 90s what 50,000 people were doing in Seattle. They were trying to stop what's brand name is a free trade agreement. They were trying to see if they could stop this genocidal economic thing that's branded free trade from going forward. They couldn't stop any of it, including this. The big one was for that multilateral agreement on trade and investment. The agro-business is in Power Act. There's all kinds of things that are just killing people, but people didn't know what that protest was about. So what are you looking for from your friend here when you signal about all these things at once? Well, part of the way that the liberal education system and everyone who comes out of it and their baby boom parents or whatever, part of the reason they're in the dark about the way in which they're in the dark isn't just to not understand why people are doing all these things or what's happening. The news we get, so for example about Spain, the news people get is like there's some kind of marches all over Spain, and they're anti-American and anti-Semitic in nature. That's what they know. Like there's some kind of fascist thing. Fascists are marching all over Spain. Like, oh, they hate hate America, I guess. Or hate. That's the news we get here. Like they're kind of like don't like the West or something, or like hate the West and hate. There's anti-Semitism involved. Like that's all they know, and that's all they would understand. That's not the main thing. It has to do with economics. And the president of the Ukraine pulling out of a trade deal that would have made them part, with moving closer to Moscow and the EU and having, protection for their economy, which is like being disintegrated like all the economies from the transnational sector. Right, so that pulling away from that and heading more, and what in our papers it calls more Western alliance means having no national economy anymore, being like hijacked by this transnational sector that's driving all the societies into a state where hundreds of thousands of people might pour out and start protesting. But we don't get the news here about that. it's only understood to be like, I don't know, there's some kind of, anti-Western thing going on in Spain, or that would be how people understand it. The fact that it's the biggest protest in the Ukraine since the Orange Revolution, people didn't know that much about the Orange Revolution. Remember, when there's things happen like that, the best the liberal universities will tell people is like it has to do with people wanting, like they don't let women drive in the Middle East, and they don't accept different. I mean, the idea is that they want like sort of liberal. They don't have a democracy is always what it is, but the idea that those things take place over economics, people are in the dark about. Here, though, it is true that there's been alarm by universities and intellectuals, and there's even an interesting article I put up on Facebook one time about saying that but there is an intellectual subculture here among 30-somethings and graduate students. Your friend being one of them is very interested in looking into like the fascist and Nazi economies. That's caused a lot of alarm. That's caused a lot of alarm here, but that's also no one. What's that all about? Well, it's going on everywhere. That there's nationalist movements of different kinds. If you're economically awake and know what this no protection for anyone's economy, the transnational sector being able to move, do whatever they want to every economy, and they're all disintegrating. But here, right, I mean, it's not taught in the universities, and if you show up and you seem to be reading about such things, you're sent to, I don't know, the university. I mean, but that's who's protesting all those countries. It's graduate students and things of that nature. That's who does that. Here, there's less of it, so there isn't, a big protest, but there will be eventually. That intellectual subculture will bubble up here, and they'll claim, well, what's happening? Is it American fascists or something? I mean, with everyone ignorant, they don't really know what all that's about. There's going to be more and more neo-fascist and nationalist and just patriotic outflow as people who are living economic reality and are being affected by what's happening. So it hasn't entirely come here, but it has in a way, because we're doing this like silent genocide by way of no protection for not allowing South American countries any protection for their economy. But that's not taught and known about, and you wonder what they're saying in the universities about what's happening in all these different places today. That's try number 2, to put together what you've prompted, and you prompted it in a way that I had to figure out to say something. So that's it, humbly. That's the best I could do at this moment.